This is the second and final part of 4.6, graphs of other trig functions. So this time we're going to talk about secant and cosecant graphs. So our central question is, how do you graph a tangent, cosecant, secant, or cotangent function? And last time we talked about tangent, cotangent. So this time we're going to talk about secant and cosecant. So the graphs of cosecant and secant functions. We obtain these graphs or curves by using the reciprocal identities. So remember, secant is 1 over sine, or cosecant is 1 over sine, and secant is 1 over cosine. So we obtain the graph of cosecant by taking the reciprocals of your y values in the graph of sine. The vertical asymptotes of your cosecant occur at the x-intercepts of your sine. And with your secant, you take the reciprocals of the y values of your cosine. And your vertical asymptotes are your x-intercepts on that one too. So let's look at a picture. This is your cosecant curve, or the graph of your cosecant. So your period and domain, or your period is the same, 2 pi, and your domain is all real numbers except your integral multiples of pi. So remember, your sine graph crosses, or your intercept is always at multiples of pi. So that's why those are your asymptotes. You cannot cross there. Your range are all numbers such that y is less than or equal to -1, or y is greater than or equal to 1. So your graphs will not go above your max. So it goes just above your max or below your min. Your vertical asymptotes are integrals of multiples of pi. Again, that's why your domain is restricted, and it's an odd function. Your secant curve is similar, only with your cosine. So your domain is 2 pi, or your period is 2 pi, your domain is all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2, because that's where your x-intercept is on your cosine. And your range is y is less than or equal to -1, or y is greater than or equal to 1. So same idea, it touches at your max and your min. Your vertical asymptotes are odd multiples of pi over 2, and it's an even function. So using the sine curve to obtain your cosecant curve. So use the graph of sine x plus pi over 4. So this is your graph of x plus pi over 4. So we have dotted lines at our vertical asymptotes because that's where your x-intercepts are, so that's why you have your vertical lines there. If you think back to what we had, every time that you had a maximum, that was the minimum of your cosecant. Anytime you had a minimum, that was the maximum of your cosecant. See? So in red is your sine, and in blue is your cosecant. So it is very useful to find your sine or cosine if you're working with secant, and then graphing your new one off of that. So we're actually going to look at an example and graph it ourselves of a secant function. So you want to begin by graphing the reciprocal function, your cosine. So we've done this part before, so you know A is 2 and B is 2, so we can find our amplitude. Amplitude is the absolute value of A, so 2. And your period is 2 pi divided by B, so 2 pi divided by 2 is pi. So you have your amplitude and you have your period. So now we have to find our 5 key points. So the x values for your 5 key points would be 0, pi over 4, pi over 2, and 3 pi over 4, and then pi. So if you went back and you plugged in and solved for each of them, that's what you would get. So now you have all 5 of your points, so evaluate your function, and these are your 5 key points. So you want to plug those into your graph. So the red is our cosine function. We draw vertical asymptotes at your x-intercepts and use those to guide. So again, red is your cosine and blue is your secant. So when you're drawing secant and cosecant, it is important to draw your sine or cosine function first, and then draw your new graphs off of that. So the 6 curves of trigonometry. If you do not already have these written down or a snippet of them, I would do that now. So sine, domain is all real numbers, so negative infinity to infinity. Range is negative 1 to 1, and your period is 2 pi. Your cosine, domain is all real numbers, negative infinity to infinity. Range is negative 1 to 1, and your period is 2 pi. Your tangent graph. Your domain is all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2. Range is all real numbers, so negative infinity to infinity, and your period is pi. Your cotangent, all real numbers except integral multiples of pi. Your range is negative infinity to infinity, and your period is pi. And then your cosecant, domain is all real numbers except the integral multiples of pi. Your range, negative infinity to negative 1, and then 1 to infinity, and your period is 2 pi. And lastly, your secant curve, your domain is all real numbers except odd multiples of pi over 2. Your range is negative infinity to negative 1, and then 1 to infinity, and your period is 2 pi. So make sure you finish the questions below and then work on your homework, and hopefully I will see you in live class. Again, this is a lot of information. If you have any questions at all, please contact me or come to live class and ask any questions.